Hi everyone. Today we're going to discuss the details on how to write a synthesis. Some of this is going to be redundant because we've discussed many of the elements in class, but at the risk of sounding redundant, let's discuss what a synthesis is. Basically, when you're synthesizing, you are bringing in different separate elements and creating one entity with those elements. So in this case, you have different sources that you are going to use to combine to create one coherent essay. You guys all created your own synthesis prompts, which were phenomenal. I was very impressed with what you created. Now you are very familiar with what a synthesis is, and I didn't want it to be so intimidating for you guys when you see it. And now that you've created your own, it's going to be fairly easy to approach this. So, and I'm trying to minimize this presentation. I don't want it to be too long. Um, I want to focus on the skill sets that you guys need in order to create effective synthesis. So, on the AP exam, you have three essays. You have the rhetorical analysis, you have the argumentative, and you have the synthesis essay. When you get to the synthesis essay, you'll know it's a synthesis because of the sources that will be attached to it. So you'll have between 6 and 7 sources on a given topic. At least one of those sources will be a visual of some sort. So it could be a photograph, a cartoon, a chart, graph, etc. And the prompt page, which you created your own, the introduction on that prompt page will guide you toward the topic with a series of questions. Those questions are not to be answered explicitly, but they're there to provoke thought, to present the controversy, on the topic, both sides, to give a little bit of background information. On the assignment portion of the prompt is where you'll find the claim that you have to take a position on. Now, you either defend the claim that's stated, or you challenge it, or you qualify it. I recommend that you defend or challenge it, and you must use the recommended number of sources, which is usually 3, to support your position. You must present an argument on the topic. I will emphasize this throughout this presentation because what students do sometimes is they will take sources, use information from the sources, and just summarize them, and they overlook the objective of this essay. Your argument, your position, your opinion is central in this essay. Everything you use, any source, any evidence, is to support your opinion, your position on the topic. So if the claim is about animal testing, stating something like animal testing should be is an ethical method in advancing the medical or in advancing in medicine or something like that. You either agree with this and defend it, or you challenge it in your essay, and then you're going to use the sources there. Any 3, you don't get extra credit for using, the visual, or they don't take off points for not using the visual or whatever. Any 3 sources that you were able to comprehend, because if you're using the information incorrectly, they are going to take points off for that. So use any 3 sources that you found beneficial to your position, and use them to insert them, which I'm going to show you how to do in just a bit. But you have to insert them in the right places to support your argument, your position. And you will be given 15 minutes on the exam to review the sources. And during this time, I recommend you highlight, underline, write things that you feel that you comprehended, number 1, and number 2, that you felt were easy enough to paraphrase or quote or summarize. And I'm going to explain the difference between those three in just a bit. Take notes. Okay, this is a great piece of evidence right here. I understood this. I can use this. Oh, this is a great counter piece. This is a great counter argument I can use, which again I will discuss on how to do all that in just a bit. So I just wanted to review what to expect on the actual exam. So 15 minutes to review, and then they'll give you 40 minutes to write the actual essay. So, are they expecting a masterpiece? Probably not, but they obviously want to have a glorified rough draft, okay? And you do have to develop a concise and coherent essay. So not only are you presenting an argument, but you also have to make sure you're writing coherent sentences, you're paying attention to punctuation and grammar, and all of these things. Are they expecting perfection? Absolutely not, but make sure that it is at least coherent. If you bear with me here, I do have a sample essay I'm going to show you in just a bit that a student wrote. One of our students wrote at Fordson, but not this year. But I will get to that in just a bit. I want to show you first, I want to discuss quoting, paraphrasing, and summarizing. These three elements should be in your essay, but sometimes we forget the difference. So before I even show you how to use those in your essay, I want to review the difference. So quotation, as you see here, matches the source word for word. It's verbatim, and it's set off by quotation marks, indicating to the reader that these words are not mine, I took them from somewhere. And you're going to give that, and all three of these, you're going to give credit to where you got the information, but the quotation itself will be set off by the quotation marks. Paraphrasing matches the source's meaning, but you're using your own words. The length, when you paraphrase, should be very close to the length of the original material. In contrast with the summary, you are pretty much, it sums up the main points of the source, using your own words as well, but it's going to be much shorter than the source itself. So if it's a paragraph long and you're summarizing, it's pretty much going to be one sentence. If it's a book that you're summarizing, depending on how long the book is, your summary is going to be probably a fourth of that. So if not a fourth, actually that's incorrect. It could be a page. I can write a summary of a whole book in one page. About, say, I don't know, I want to say maybe 300, 400 words. So that's the difference between these three now, and you will be using all three in your essay, but I do have to make a point that quotations should be used less than paraphrasing and summarizing. You will probably be using paraphrasing more than any of these three. Try not to quote too many times, because if you're quoting too many times, you're basically telling the AP graders, I did not understand this quote. And so I am just going to paste it here for you and just leave it there. Try not to do that. And if you are using a quotation, you must explain it after. You can't just, have a quote drop from the sky in an essay and have no explanation, because again, you're indicating you didn't comprehend it. Okay, so let's move on here. Let's see what the difference is. So in a quotation, I'm sorry, I basically just said some of this. Okay, so a quotation, how do you do it? You copy the sources for a quotation. You're going to copy the source's words exactly, put in the quotation mark, cite the source. If you're paraphrasing, you read over the section you want to paraphrase. I always tell my students, put it aside and write down the same information, but in your own words. Go back to see if you left out any important information. And the reason I give students this particular advice is because if you're looking at what you want to paraphrase and you're writing it, what you're what students tend to do is they replace just a couple of words in the sentence and then they think they paraphrased. That's not paraphrasing, that's actually plagiarism. And that's how a lot of people fall into plagiarism, because they're not putting it away. And if you cite it, you're not really plagiarizing anyway, but you're not paraphrasing either, and you don't have quotes. If I just substituted one or two words in a sentence, that does not mean that I paraphrased it. So that's why I say put it away, don't look at it. And then pretend that you're having a conversation with someone. Explain to that person, what did you just read? Word for word. What I mean by word for word is you are paraphrasing that sentence, okay, or that paragraph. So what you're explaining to somebody should be about the same length as what you read. Very different than summarizing. If you look here, summarizing, it's not that different, but it is different. When you read over the section that you would like to summarize, put it aside as well, okay? But write down what you think are the main points, or the main points that are useful to you. Because if you read a section and I read a section, we may summarize it a little differently because the main points the main points to me may be very different than the main points for you in your argument, in your position. So that's why a summary is going to be very different, and also it's going to be shorter because I'm only summarizing the main points. And again, you have to cite the source. You have to cite the source for all three of these. All three of these. And some people think that, if I'm paraphrasing or if I'm summarizing, you don't have to cite the source. It's only with quotations. Well, all three, if you don't cite the source, you are plagiarizing. And the AP graders will take off points if you do not cite something. So let's see what this looks like. Okay, let's look at this original passage right here. Students frequently overuse direct quotations in taking notes, and as a result, they overuse quotations in the final research paper. Probably only 10% of your final manuscript should appear as directly quoted matter. Therefore, you should strive to limit the amount of exact transcribing of source materials while taking notes. And I put the source of where I got that from because this is literally just verbatim. I got it from Purdue. So let's see if I wanted to quote one line in this. I'm not going to quote. By the way, don't ever quote an entire paragraph. And you really should not be even quoting sentences. I mean, if you're going to quote something, it should be something that I cannot reword. Something so unique. It could be sometimes maybe descriptive words or something like that. But in this case, I want to quote this sentence. This is the incorrect way to do it. I just took this one line. I said, probably only about 10% of your final manuscript should appear as directly quoted matter. What is wrong with this line if I wanted to quote it? What is wrong with it? Hopefully you answer that there are no quotations and no citations. So this is plagiarism. But over here, I have the exact same sentence, but I added the quotations and I cited it. Very important. So I just saved myself a lawsuit right there. Okay, so moving on. Paraphrasing. Same original passage. Let's look at the incorrect paraphrase. Okay, so students often use too many direct quotations when they take notes, resulting in too many of them in the final research paper. In fact, probably only 10% of the final copy should consist of directly quoted material. So it is important to limit the amount of source material copied while taking notes. Well, if you noticed, very little is changed here. I mean, it's almost copy-paste of the original passage, but I replaced or I took away a couple of words. That's not paraphrasing. This would be more, and there's no citation. So this would be a correct paraphrase. In research papers, students often quote excessively, failing to keep quoted material down to a desirable level. Since the problem usually originates during note taking, it is essential to minimize the material recorded verbatim. And I have the citation there, and that is a good example of what a paraphrase is. And again, I do, as you can see here, there are the source that we got this from. Okay, now an example of a summary. You can see the length of the original passage, the same passage that we've been reading. The incorrect summary. Students often use too many direct quotes when taking notes. Again, some of this is verbatim, and I'm sorry, let me read this. Okay, too many quotes in their final paper. Quotes should only make up 10% of the whole work. Actually, what's wrong with this, now that I'm rereading it, sorry, there is no citation here. So if you look at the correct summary, J.D. Lester warns students that using too many direct quotes when taking notes will lead to too many quotations in their final paper. Quotes should only make up about 10% of the whole work. So the incorrect summary basically didn't have the citation. But look at the length. If you compare, it's much shorter than the original passage. All that was put in the summary, different than the paraphrase, were just the main points. And that's important to notice the difference between the summary and the paraphrase. Look at the paraphrase here, it's much longer than the summary. So that's the difference between these three. And it's important to know that because when you go back to write your essay, let's go back to our sample essay here. All right, so the essay that we're going to look at was responding to a video game prompt. And it was whether or not video games are harmful to people, to children and people in general. So let's take a look at how the student approached this. I highlighted here the claim. Now, as you guys notice, this is an open claim, which is what we're emphasizing in the class. You can use a closed claim or a closed thesis, but it's highly recommended. It's boring. Honestly, it's not as sophisticated, and it's not as, I guess, it's highly respected as the open claim on the AP exam. Again, when it comes to college, it will depend on the professor, but usually the open claim is what is recommended. But if you were to do a closed claim for this particular essay, it would look something like this, because this is what we're about to read. So the claim that is in the essay says video games negatively influence children and people in general. If we were to use a closed claim, you didn't read the essay yet, but if you were, this is what it would look like. I'm sorry, if you did read the essay, you'd know this is what the claim should look like. Video games influence children and people in general because they create urges towards violent rampage. That was their first body paragraph. Second was to skew a gamer's perception, create antisocial or bully personalities, and waste away valuable time. So that means in their essay they talked about all these. But again, this is what is preferred. So let's go back to our sample. And again, a student wrote this. Now, this was a research paper. This is not something that they did in 40 minutes or 50 minutes in class. This is something that was done at home, and like a research, like what you're about to do. So let's see how they handled this. Chaos is everywhere. A mass selection of weapons is strewn about on the ground, and bullets are whizzing through the air. Bloodstains color the ground from dripping bodies. Shards of glass and wooden pieces explode from the blown-up cars and houses. People are running and children are screaming. It seems like a scene from the news, but in actuality, this is what is seen in a usual video game. Video games, violent or not, play a big role in the lives of both children and adults. As our technology advances, an increasing number of children are becoming subject to video games at a young age. With the exception of a few educational games, video games glorify violence. I'm sorry. With the exception of a few educational games, video games glorify violence. Video games today appear more realistic. Graphics are more vibrant and look very real. They are bloodier with car crashes, exploding buildings, and miscellaneous shootings, and sometimes even used as training for mass murder. Some people argue that video games are a positive influence to children's problem solving and better prepare them for the real world. But in reality, video games have a negative impact. Video games negatively influence children and people in general. Now, technically, the student kind of said the claim here, but then explicitly said it here. So now we know the position this student is taking on the topic of video games. So then the student spent the first body paragraph talking about violent rampages. And that basically what she's saying in this first body paragraph is that video games influence in certain individuals to enact or participate in some violent rampages or trigger violent rampages. Okay, so let's see how this student handles this. Violent rampages are dangerous and could potentially harm numbers of people. I think it should be number of people there. Potentially harm numbers of people. Well, I guess that's fine too. In past shootings, studies have found that the oppressor was most likely an avid video game player. Now, as you notice, this is what I want you to notice right here. Okay, I'm sorry, this is what I want you to notice. This is a citation. Now, oops, wrong thing, I meant to highlight. Okay, so this is a citation here. Do you see any quotes right here? No. And I don't have the source on me. I wanted to show you, but I don't have it on me. But I looked in the source when I was at home, and the source did not say this verbatim. She paraphrased this. So she paraphrased this, and then, so that's why there's no quotations here. And actually in this essay, you'll see very little quotations. She did a good job of embedding information from the sources into this essay. And she definitely proved that she does comprehend what she's reading. So she has the author's last name here. But on the AP exam, because this was a research paper, so for the sake of the research paper you're turning in, I definitely want authors' last names, or if it's an article title, you know, the article title. If it's a website, you know, the title, whatever title's there. Otherwise, you're putting the author's last name. On the AP exam, you are allowed to write source A, source B. So if this was source A, you don't have to write the author. You just write source A, and that would have been perfectly fine on the AP exam. They do not take off points. If you put source A versus the author, you don't get extra points for putting the author's name. So you are allowed to use either or. But for the sake of the research paper that you're writing for the class, I would definitely write the author's name. What was his name? Barclay. Okay. So moving on. So she said her piece up there, and then she says, then she writes, for example, Adam Lanza, who shot 26 people, including children, at Sandy Hook Elementary before committing suicide, had played games like the Call of Duty. Barkley. Again, she put the author. She did not quote. She just paraphrased from the article, and then she used the author, the same author. And then she brings in another piece of information from the article. Over 90% of video games glorify violence and make it seem as if that violence is approved in our everyday society by giving rewards inside the game. I have to read that sentence again. Over 90% of video games glorify violence and make it seem as if violence, I don't think the word that needs to be there, as if violence is approved in our everyday society by giving rewards inside the game. And again, she got that from this article. Now, there's a couple of things that I would have changed here, because she continues, as you can see here. She's providing a lot of information from this one article, which is fine, but there's a certain way to go about that. If you're providing information from the same article back to back like that in a paragraph, you don't necessarily have to cite it after every sentence. Like if it's a back-to-back sentence, I would have just waited and just done it here. I wouldn't have to do it here and here if it's this close in proximity. But if, say, I'm writing something and then later I'm using it in the same paragraph, no, I would have to do it separately. But since it's back to back like this, I would have just cited it right here, to be quite honest with you. So let's see if so far her 3 sentences back to back have been from a source, which is fine, but I would like to see her perspective, because remember, your position is central here. You need to bring in these sources, the evidence to back up your claim. What are you telling me? What are your thoughts on the video games? Because you claimed that they have a negative influence on children and people in general. So I need to know more about how you feel about it, and then bring in this to support you. But let's see how they handle the rest of this body paragraph. Even games rated E for everyone have violence. And while it is minimal, it can still affect a child who does not yet know right from wrong. A study found that 35 to 55 E-rated games involve deliberate violence and 33 rewarded or required violence to advance in the game. Again, there's that same source, but it looked like, actually I'm not, let me see here. It looked like this was the students' thoughts, and then she brought in a study to, she brought in a study to support that claim. With games like these, society cannot expect children to remain unaffected. Okay, it looks like here we go. Here is where the student starts to discuss her point, her views on the topic. So it looked like she kind of gave the quotes, not the quotes, I'm sorry. She provided the evidence from the articles in the first part of the body paragraph, and then started to explain down here. I would have not have done this, to be quite honest. I would have embedded the paraphrasing or the quotes in between my thoughts. I would bring them in to support my thoughts. I can't tell you they will take away points for doing it this way, but it would show you're a stronger writer if you had. So let's finish here and see how she finished off this paragraph. With games like these, society cannot expect children to remain unaffected. These video games cause feelings of hostility and violence, just like the feelings that occur after watching an action-packed movie. Both movies and video games cause emotions in which there is an urge to act like the characters and live up to society's vision of quote-unquote cool. These emotions can lead to the urge of wanting to do what is seen. According to Barkley, oh, she does, uh, this is very important. I'm going to explain this in just a minute. According to Barkley, a study found that role-playing characters and scenes from the games allowed people to try on different personalities, ranges of freedom of identity that had not been seen before the pre-gaming era. This may be a harmless idea for some children, but poses problems for those who cannot distinguish mere role playing from real violence. This is partly what causes mass shootings like the Sandy Hook massacre. Now, she said this is partly what causes mass shootings. Now, this seems like it's her opinion. I mean, this entire thing is her opinion, and she's bringing in the sources here. Not bad. She did a good job, honestly. I would have liked to see some more of her words in between these quotes here, but honestly, it was not a bad body paragraph. Um, I wanted to point out this right here. So, when you're citing in your body paragraphs, you can do it one of two ways. You can do it at the end, before the period. Okay, do not cite after the punctuation. It has to go inside the punctuation. You can do it that way, or you can do it this way. This is a very sophisticated way of doing it. You can say according to so and so, according to the article, and then name the article and make sure you put it in quotations. Or you can say according to the author, like she did here. Always use the author's last name. You never ever use the first name unless you're first introducing the author. You can say the first and last name, and then every time after that, it's the last name. Now, if you noticed this source, this Barkley source, was the only one that was used in this body paragraph. Now, I would have liked to see a mix, maybe at least another source in here, especially because this was a research paper that you had time at home to do. Definitely would like to see more than one source in a body paragraph. But for the sake of the AP exam, they do let that go. Like say you're using one source and one body paragraph because you're short on time. But I have to be honest with you, you will get a higher score if you mix it up. You only need three total. So some students tend to do like one for each body paragraph. But to be honest with you, you can use the three in different times. You don't have to use it just once in just one body paragraph. So it's really best to use at least two in the body paragraph, that it's not just this one source that you're using, because how strong is my opinion if there's only one source that I have to kind of back that up. But then again, it's depending on what you're focusing on in that body paragraph too. So again, it's not like they're going to take that many points off for that, because they know you're timed as well. So I don't want to keep talking to make this very long and bore you, but I'm hoping you're understanding the difference. I'm hoping you're understanding the concept is what I meant to say. Sorry, the concept of a synthesis essay. Again, it's your opinion. You're bringing in these sources to kind of help you out. And I'm going to just kind of scroll through this essay so you guys can take a look at it and read it on your own and just kind of see what this particular student did. If you look down here, I don't know if you got down here yet. I was reading. This is incorrect what this student did here. The experimental studies often show that participants who play a violent game are more aggressive after gameplay than participants who play a non-violent game. And it looks like she was trying to cite this, but she put two authors and the title of the article. I would just put the authors. No need for the title of the article. If you have the authors, you put the authors' last names. She didn't need any of this. So that was wrong. She would have gotten points off for that. But if you do notice, she has several different authors in this paragraph, so it looks like it would have been a stronger paragraph because she has these different authors and different perspectives. I'm going to get to the counter argument in just a minute, but I kind of wanted you guys to kind of get a chance to read all of this. And then that paragraph continues. I do kind of want to scroll down to the bottom to show you something in just a minute. Okay, at that time I required them to do 10 pages, so that's what that was all about. The conclusion. I want to go to the conclusion. Okay. The conclusion, you must restate the claim at the very beginning. So again, much like the other essays we've been doing, you have the introduction, you got to come up with a hook, background information, discuss the controversy, then your claim, and then you have 2 or 3 body paragraphs. If you can come up with 2 strong body paragraphs for the AP exam, you're good to go. If you can come up with 3, phenomenal. And then you have your conclusion, which you have to start off with your claim. But for the sake of our paper, I want, I forgot what I told you guys in class. I believe it was 3 to 5 pages. I don't remember. I have to look back and see what I wrote, but I think it was 3 to 5 page essay. And but still, the conclusion. So you're going to have several body paragraphs, an introduction, and a conclusion. Your conclusion must restate the claim. So this is what she has here. In conclusion, domestic video game industry is an influential part of many lives and brings in nearly nearly 12 billion a year. This is very incorrect. Is this a claim? This is not a claim. And I remember actually commenting on that when I was reading this. This form of media can have positive and negative effects on our children and our society. However, the violent video games becoming increasingly influential in children's lives. It is no wonder why children are becoming more aggressive. Okay, she's going on and on and on and on here. And the claim is somewhere in here, but she didn't say it explicitly, and it must be said explicitly, and it must be done right here. So I would, if she wants to keep that for, I have to write a claim here. I can probably write the closed claim that we wrote here, maybe, over here. Because you must have the claim there, but it cannot be verbatim what you wrote in your introduction. So we could do that. There's nothing wrong with doing that in the conclusion. Oh, great. I just made the entire thing single-spaced. This is me in technology, people. All right. Here we go. Okay. So. All right. So in conclusion, video games influence children and people in general because they create urges towards violent rampage, skew a gamer's perception, create antisocial or bully personalities, and waste valuable time. I would actually also change this beginning part because that's verbatim to what was in the beginning of the essay. So I would actually even change that up a little bit. But basically, just make sure you have a claim at the beginning of your conclusion. And again, you're timed. If you just have time to write a conclusion, I'm sorry, the first sentence and then maybe another, you're good to go in the conclusion. Because remember, in your conclusion, it's your call to action time. It's like, okay, I spent this much time on trying to prove to you that video games are negatively affect people, negatively affect our children. Here is where I'm going to say, okay, this is what we need to do. This is what I need you guys to do to eliminate video games or to make them less violent. Because I just spent all of this time trying to prove to you that they do negatively impact our children. They do negatively impact people. I talked about a shooting. I talked about this and this and this. Now, what do you want to leave your readers with? What do you want them to do about it? What should they do about it? And so this is your call to action time, okay? And that's how you end an argumentative usually. Now, we didn't talk about a counter argument yet, and I do apologize if my voice is becoming very tired because I am very tired. It's about 2 a.m. right now, and so I do apologize for that. Let's talk about the counter argument. Some people handle it different ways. Some people write it in their first body paragraph, and then they call it a day. Honestly, the best way, if you want a high score on the AP exam, on your essays, write, address the counter argument simultaneously as you are writing. As you're writing, address the other side. So in your first body paragraph, as you notice, she didn't mention really the other side. She didn't really bring in anything and refute it. Always, 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 my two words, if you guys remember from the beginning of the year, concede and then refute. Okay? So you can concede, meaning you're going to agree. You can bring in something from a source that is provided for you and say, okay, source D mentions, blah, 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 which is counter to you. However, the benefits far outweigh what source D is discussing. And you are going to concede in the sense that, yeah, you know what, source D is right. That does happen. However, this means more. This is more beneficial. This is more important. This is more relevant. And you're going to refute it. So you agree and then you disagree by making a point. So it's concede and refute. I'm going to concede to something and then I'm going to refute it. And you can use evidence from the sources to do both, So in this particular, she didn't have really much. I read through this. Her counter arguments, they're there, but they're not as explicit. So I know one of the counter arguments was that there's been studies that show that video games have very little influence in TV shows or whatever. They have very little influence on people long term. On most people know that they're fake. And I think she did mention that something around here. That most people know the difference between role playing or whatever. I think she did mention that now that I'm. But then she also mentioned that many kids at certain ages don't know the difference between role play and reality. And she had she said that I think right here. And then she also, she said it poses problems for those who cannot distinguish mere role playing from real violence. And those are people that do go out and cause these these mass crimes because they didn't distinguish the difference between this and this, or maybe they did, but that's the point she was trying to make. There was another point I wanted to make about counter arguments. be diligent with it, because you must address the counter argument in the argumentative essays, whether it's the synthesis or your argumentative that you write without the sources. You must address the other side. Do you have to do it throughout the entire paper? No. But it must be evident. And remember this, the counter argument is present in your mind the entire time, from the moment you start brainstorming to the moment you finish that essay. Because otherwise, what are you arguing? Otherwise, how did you form your argument? You're forming your argument based on the other side. When a lawyer walks into the courtroom, just remember, when a lawyer walks into the courtroom to defend his client or her client, the other side is in mind. And that's the difference between a great lawyer and a really bad lawyer, is that one is prepared for the argument on the other side. That's why they tell their client, tell me everything, don't leave anything out, because I need to be prepared. I need to know what I'm up against. What is the argument on the other side? And so any strong argument is also very, very well educated in the other side. So when you think about it, the counter argument is there the entire time, but you must not tiptoe around it. You actually have to address it. Say, yeah, I heard this, and then so say this and whatnot. And actually, I just remembered something as I was talking. I was actually doing some research on YouTube in preparation for this presentation. And I came across this, and I just remember that I paused it because I really liked reading this. It says how to step into a synthesis conversation, and I loved the way this presenter. Her name is Jillian Thomas, and I really loved her. I did like her presentation. And there's another presenter too, Matthew. I think his name is Matthew Singleton. If you want to look up his videos as well, he does a really great job of presenting a synthesis. So the way she presented it here, she provides this cartoon, and it's like having a conversation. Imagine yourself at a gathering, or in class, and you have 3 or 4 students discussing something, and is discussing a topic, and you want to somehow insert yourself in this conversation. And that's essentially what a synthesis is. That's essentially what you're doing in your essay. There's a topic at hand here, and you have 6 or 7 sources, and that's about 6 or 7 people having a conversation. And that's how you have to imagine it in your head, and that's how she presents it in her presentation here. And so I'm literally just taking this from her because I found it beneficial. Maybe a good way for you guys to I'm sorry, one second. Okay. A good way for you guys to think about it. Okay, so you have here 3 people. Doesn't it cost more? I'm sorry, I'm reading this right here. Doesn't it cost more to purchase locally grown foods? And then someone else here says, eating local means less unnecessary travel pollution. And then someone else says, I feel we must eat local to ensure high quality products. So here are 3 people having a conversation. You want to somehow insert yourself into this conversation. Okay? And that's how you are going to approach the synthesis. So let's see how it might be done. Funny, you are talking about buying local. I was just at Pepper Place this morning. I think that's what it meant to say. While I agree, Tom, that locally grown foods are more costly to the consumer, Sally is right that the overall benefits for our health and environment are worth the upfront price. So do you see what happened there? Now, obviously, you're not going to be writing things like, oh, funny, you are talking about blah, blah, blah. But there is, right here, it's really relevant what this person did. They agreed, they conceded to what Tom said, but then refuted it with what Sally said. And that's what you can do in your essays. You can concede to something that one source said, and then refute it with what the other source says in support of your argument. Because remember, your argument, your opinion is central here to the essay. Okay, so that I just thought that was a neat way to explain to you how to approach using the sources um, and combining them and also addressing the counter argument. And you have to do this all seamless in a seamless manner. Like your essays should not be choppy. It should not be summarizing the sources and void of your argument. So you have to pay attention to all of that, and you have to make sure that you're addressing the counter argument. And again, the counter argument is there the entire time. So let's go back to, I think that's pretty much it that I wanted to go over. I will post on my blog the requirements for the essay if I hadn't already, and we'll go from there. Hopefully this was beneficial. I'm sorry I tried to, my goal was to keep it short, but it didn't look like I did. I do apologize for that. But hopefully it was beneficial. And again, I wish I was there in class, but hopefully this was helpful to you guys. Please feel free to email me with any questions or concerns that you have. And good luck. Happy writing.